I'm back in the White House, we will use every tool, lever, and authority to get the homeless off our streets.
They're homeless by choice.
No.
The city's mayor just declared a state of emergency because the homelessness crisis became violent.
Allentown is set to remove roughly 70 homeless people living in a camp along Jordan Creek.
4.3 square miles of pure urban decay, where 9,000 to 15,000 people live on the streets. The crime rate here is 103% above the national average.
New York tops the list of cities with the highest number of homeless people in the United States.
On a single night in January 2024, federal accounts found more than 771,000 Americans without a home, the highest number ever recorded, and an 18% jump in just 1 year. That's a national homelessness rate of 2.3 per thousand, a 30% surge in only 2 years. New York City reported 132,000 people in its shelters, while unofficial estimates put the city's true homeless population above 350,000, larger than the population of Pittsburgh. California logged over 187,000 people without stable housing, and smaller states like Vermont set records of their own. Here's the contradiction. Homelessness has become both America's sharpest social failure and a multi-billion-dollar economy. Cities pour money into sweeps, nonprofits run billion-dollar operations, and developers profit when encampments are cleared from valuable land. This isn't only about tents on sidewalks or families in cars. It's about a system where crisis itself has become a business model. And the question now isn't how big the problem will get, it's how long those who profit from it can afford to keep it unsolved. Homelessness in America isn't new, but today's scale is unprecedented. In the early 20th century, the image was the transient hobo, man riding rail cars in search of day labor. The Great Depression turned it into mass evictions and sprawling shantytowns, with churches and charities scrambling to keep people alive. By the 1970s, another wave hit. The Vietnam veterans came home with PTSD, drug use surged, and cities hollowed out. But the sharpest shift was deinstitutionalization. Tens of thousands of patients discharged from state hospitals with no community safety net waiting for them. Then came the 1980s. In 1981, the federal government slashed HUD's budget by nearly 60%. Programs that once funded affordable housing construction or rental subsidies disappeared almost overnight. Street homelessness spiked. Around 250,000 Americans were unhoused in 1980. By 2010, the number had nearly tripled. Policy didn't just influence the crisis, it locked it in. What was once seen as a temporary misfortune became a permanent feature of American life. And permanence created space for something else. An economy built around managing, not solving, homelessness. The 2024 federal count confirmed what many cities already knew. Homelessness clusters, and its footprint keeps shifting. California leads with more than 187,000 unhoused people, from massive encampments in Los Angeles to smaller camps along Sonoma's highways. New York shelters hold over 130,000 nightly, but advocates estimate the true total is far higher. Seattle, San Francisco, and Phoenix remain flashpoints, housing markets tightening while wages stagnate. Chicago's expressways are lined with tents even as billions pour into downtown redevelopment. The crisis is spreading beyond urban corners. In Sullivan County, New York, the homeless population tripled in just 2 years. Appalachia's roadside camps multiply. Families in Arizona and New Mexico sleep in cars at truck stops and desert pull-offs. Even within counties, the picture splits. Sonoma reported a 23% decline overall, but chronic homelessness rose 20% and families surged 37%. Veterans saw progress thanks to targeted programs, while other groups fell further behind. The pattern is clear. Homelessness rises where housing is scarce and services are cut. America now has a patchwork system, some counties bending the curve, others drowning, with no unified national trajectory. homelessness isn't just a humanitarian crisis. It's become a business. What started as church missions and soup kitchens has hardened into a multi-billion-dollar supply chain. Its survival depends not on solving the problem, but on managing it. Cities now pay private contractors millions for encampment cleanups, dismantling tents, discarding belongings, and fencing off public spaces. San Francisco spends tens of millions annually on private security patrols. The companies call it abatement. Residents call it a revolving door. Nonprofits have scaled to corporate size. PATH operates with a $100 million budget. The Salvation Army collects hundreds of millions in federal grants alongside private donations. Collectively, major shelter networks manage budgets in the billions. They provide real services, but their revenue flows only while homelessness remains visible. Real estate developers aren't neutral either. In Denver and San Jose, they've funded relocation programs to clear encampments off land slated for luxury projects. In some cases, they bankroll tiny home villages, not as permanent housing, but as a buffer to move people off parcels worth 10 times more redeveloped. The longer the crisis persists, the larger the ecosystem grows. Contractors bill more hours, nonprofits secure bigger grants, developers unlock higher profits. The industry doesn't measure success by how many people are permanently housed, but by how much money it can attract to keep managing the problem. If the homeless industry is a supply chain, its most powerful drivers sit far above the streets. Take Silicon Valley. Tech billionaires are quick to fund pilot projects, tiny home villages, high-tech shelters, innovation grants, each framed as a bold solution. In practice, these programs house a few hundred people at best, while the same donors lobby hard against inclusionary zoning laws or affordable housing mandates in their own backyards. It's a dual game: philanthropy for headlines, lobbying for property values. Real estate capital plays its part. In cities like New York and Los Angeles, large landlords and REITs bankroll candidates who oppose rent control, while quietly supporting bond measures for new shelters. Why? Shelters can be built on cheaper land far from luxury developments, while rent stabilization would directly cut into returns. The end result? Homelessness is managed rather than prevented, contained rather than reduced. Then there's politics. Municipal leaders are under constant pressure to do something, not necessarily to end homelessness, but to make it less visible. Ordinances against camping, panhandling, or vehicle dwelling multiply year after year. Enforcement is then outsourced to private contractors, the same firms profiting from encampment sweeps and relocation projects. At the state level, budget priorities tell the same story. California's 2025-26 budget eliminated direct funding for its homeless housing, assistance, and prevention grant program. Nationwide, the Trump administration's proposed $532 million cut to HUD's homeless programs would eliminate 166,000 supportive housing units. Cuts like these got the very policies, permanent supportive housing, housing first programs that have the best track records for reducing homelessness. Instead, billions continue to flow into short-term fixes. Shelters that cycle people in and out, sweeps that displace but don't house, PR-friendly pilot projects that treat symptoms without touching the root. Policy and profit align because homelessness, when seen as an externality, becomes cheaper to manage than to solve. And when billions of public and private dollars are at stake, visibility, not victory, becomes the metric of success. Behind every solution, there's money changing hands. Some of the biggest nonprofits in the sector manage budgets that rival mid-sized corporations. The Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, for example, controls more than $800 million in city and county funding each year. The Salvation Army takes in hundreds of millions in federal grants on top of private donations. These organizations do provide services, shelter beds, outreach, case management, but their survival depends on the persistence of homelessness. The grants and contracts only flow while the problem remains visible. Philanthropy plays its own double game. Tech billionaires bankroll tiny home villages and innovation labs that house a few hundred people at best, while lobbying against affordable housing mandates that could permanently stabilize thousands. To the public, it looks like generosity. In practice, it protects their property values. Real estate developers profit indirectly. In Los Angeles, Denver, and San Jose, encampment relocation programs are often funded with developer support. The goal isn't permanent housing, it's clearing valuable land for luxury projects. And then there's politics. City officials accept campaign donations from contractors hired to run encampment sweeps. State lawmakers sponsor both eviction protections and laws that criminalize camping, hedging bets on both sides. Motives vary: humanitarian, reputational, financial. But the effect is the same. America spends billions on homelessness each year, yet most of it cycles back into the institutions managing the crisis, not resolving it. Homelessness isn't just a social tragedy. It's an economic sinkhole. Healthcare costs are enormous. Emergency room visits for unhoused individuals can run $10,000 to $20,000 each. Repeat admissions make them some of the most expensive patients in the system. In Phoenix, doctors describe treating the same man half a dozen times in a single month for exposure-related infections. Each stay ran into the thousands. Housing him permanently would have cost a fraction of that and broken the cycle. Law enforcement absorbs another share. Police are routinely dispatched to respond to calls about encampments, loitering, or petty theft tied to survival. Each arrest, booking, and court case costs thousands, with many ending in short jail stints that do nothing to address root causes. Businesses pay too. Downtowns invest in safety zone marketing, private security, and storefront fortifications to reassure tourists and shoppers. Entire districts budget for visible homeless management as part of doing business. The hidden math is brutal. A single chronically homeless person can generate over $40,000 in public costs annually. ER visits, police calls, jail time, cleanups. By contrast, permanent supportive housing programs cost roughly $8,000 per person per year and reduce overall public spending by half. In other words, America spends more managing homelessness than it would housing it. But the spending continues because it sustains jobs, contracts, and industries built around the crisis. If the money is flowing, why isn't the problem shrinking? The answer lies in broken systems and misaligned incentives. Funding is fragmented. Federal grants, state block allocations, and city levies operate in silos, each with its own reporting rules and timelines. The result is overlap in some areas, total gaps in others. Accountability is weak. Nonprofits track outputs, how many meals served, how many beds filled, but rarely long-term outcomes like housing stability. Private contractors face even less oversight. An encampment cleanup company can build millions a year while the same camp reappears a few blocks away. Criminalization makes the cycle worse. Cities spend fortunes clearing camps, only to watch them reform days later. Every sweep generates trauma, destroys belongings, and resets people back to zero, guaranteeing repeat costs down the line. Meanwhile, proven solutions like Housing First fight uphill battles. In 2025, national pilots reported an 84% success rate in keeping people housed after 3 years, saving nearly $16,000 per person annually compared to shelter or jail. Yet, funding for these programs is being cut. The Trump administration's 2025 budget proposed slashing $532 million from HUD's homelessness programs, enough to risk 166,000 supportive housing units nationwide. The system doesn't reward resolution. It rewards activity, beds filled, sweeps conducted, contracts renewed. And so, the cycle turns. Homelessness policy in America is at a crossroads. Some cities, like Houston, have embraced coordinated housing-first approaches and reported sharp declines in chronic homelessness. Others doubled down on sweeps, policing, and emergency shelters, pouring millions into temporary visibility management. At the federal level, the divide is widening. On one side, evidence-based advocates push for integrated funding tied to outcomes, fewer people on the streets, more people in permanent homes. On the other, austerity budgets and political rhetoric frame homelessness as a law enforcement issue, not a housing one. The stakes are enormous. California has already cut its homeless housing, assistance, and prevention program to zero in its 2025-26 budget. States like Louisiana and Ohio, reliant on federal funds for more than 70% of their homeless services, face the loss of tens of thousands of beds if HUD cuts move forward. Policy can either tip the balance towards resolution or entrench the homeless industry even deeper. And right now, the incentives still lean toward the latter. Homelessness in America is no longer just a social crisis. It's an economy that extracts billions while leaving the core problem unsolved. Cities spend fortunes on sweep that simply shift people a few blocks away. Nonprofits expand budgets year after year without shrinking the overall numbers. Developers bankroll solutions that clear land for luxury projects. Politicians take donations from the very firms hired to manage the misery. Meanwhile, the record counts keep climbing. Family homelessness is up 37% in places like Sonoma. Chronic homelessness grows in city after city. And for the first time since tracking began, the total topped 750,000 Americans. The paradox is clear. Solving homelessness would shrink the budgets, contracts, and influence of the institutions built around it. Crisis sustains the industry. Resolution threatens it. Yet the math shows the way forward. Permanent supportive housing costs about $8,000 per person per year, while the status quo burns through $40,000 in ER visits, policing, and cleanups. Housing First keeps 84% of people stably housed after 3 years and saves taxpayers nearly $16,000 annually per person. The only question is whether leaders will dismantle the incentives that profit from suffering or let the business of homelessness thrive while tens of thousands more join the streets. This is Bedlam Bear. Subscribe for more hidden stories of power and profit.